What was your initial thought when you took this project on?
Well, when we turned the Pinehurst corner, I always said I thanked the good Lord that I wasn't driving, because it's what we used to call in Vietnam a flashback.
Why is this a story you want to tell?
Well, we feel it's a story that needs to be told for all of Idaho. People kind of forget about North Idaho and the past history of the Bunker Hill, but it's an amazing project here with reforestation of the basically the Silver Valley area.
It was amazing right here because there was a bunch of these deciduous trees here, but the big thing is a bunch of these trees are apple trees, and you could pick apples off of them. Here's one that's in bloom. See that? That tree's been there a lot longer than 72 when I came. I mean, it was that size then.
What do you think of when you think of Ed? What comes to mind?
When I think of Ed,
Yeah.
just his amazing background, his amazing history. Basically a graduate forester from the University of Idaho and then a chemist, and he was responsible actually for the reforestation of that massive project.
You know, I think Ed has never been recognized for what he has done. I mean, I grew up in that area. Many of the families that either we interacted with my dad with the cow trading, or just know, people of the area, most of them are miners or loggers, or at some point both. We have really good family friends that he was one of the guys that worked in the nursery, in the mine, and so I was well aware, that some of that was going on. I just didn't have all the pieces, and so that's why we thought it was so important to tell this story, was because for us that even had been in the community, you might say, didn't know the story.
I was looking at getting a degree, a master's degree from the U of I, because at that time I had already graduated as a forester, and I had been offered a job as soon as I got out of the Army with this potlatch corporation. But when I got out of the Army, the timber industry was down and out, and they actually were laying off some of their foresters. So I went to my major professor that I had in undergraduate, and I was asking him, where can I get a job at? And he said, boy, everything's tight, but we got a guy here named Roy Williams in the College of Mines that's looking for a forester to manage some timberland and do reclamation work, and you'll probably have to learn a little bit because you never learned that kind of stuff in school. And so I remember Roy and Frank Pitkin bringing me up to Idaho, or up to Kellogg the first time when we rounded the Pinehurst exit. Well, when we turned the Pinehurst corner, I always said I thanked the good Lord that I wasn't driving, because it's what we used to call in Vietnam a flashback. And the flashbacks were really ugly to us. They kind of hurt you mentally, to a point physically too, but it was a flashback of what I had seen in Vietnam with them spraying Agent Orange and then dropping napalm, which causes the big fires. It starts a fire and burns everything, and all you see is bare ground. And back when you first got out of the Army and you had been there, you just wanted nothing to do with what you had done, and now all of a sudden this flashback hits you, and for an instant you know you're back in Vietnam. That's the bad thing.
My name is Jack Kendrick. I was first employed in the Silver Valley in 1973. I was there for about a year. I came back to the Silver Valley in the spring of 1977 as the chief financial officer, and became president and the chief executive officer of the Bunker Hill Company in October of 1979. Remained in that position until myself and 3 other partners purchased the Bunker Hill assets on November 1st of 1982. And I've been involved with Bunker in some capacity from the spring of 1977 until the shutdown was completed and the liquidation was completed around 2003 or 2004. Bunker Hill was one of the largest mining, smelting and refining operations in the world, producing about 100,000 annual tons of lead, the equivalent amount of zinc, about 10 million ounces of silver, and considerable amounts of byproduct metals like cadmium. The Bunker Hill ore body was discovered by Noah Kellogg in 1885. And those ores and the resulting concentrate that was produced in the first step of the processing operation had to be shipped to other smelters and refineries in order to be converted into a saleable metal. And with the other mining activity in the Silver Valley, you had Asarco there, you had Sunshine there, you had Hecla there. It became apparent that there was a need for smelting and refining capacity right there in that area, and that evolved into Bunker Hill.
The mine knew that if you spewed out all the stuff that they were spewing out that defolarized everything, that was going to happen. They had figured out apparently a balance that we can mine to this point, and after we get that, then we're doing harm to the nature. And then when World War II came and the government says, we need all the lead and everything that you can give us, then they had to step past that point. And that's when things started going bad.
Whose fault was it that it was the way it was before you got here?
Well, the fault of it was really the lead smelter and the zinc plant putting out sulfur dioxide that into the air that conifer trees can't stand because it kills the needles and the needles fall off. The biggest thing that happened was at the start of World War II, the Department of Defense wanted to make Bunker Hill produce 5,000 tons of lead a day. And they were only going to produce their 1,000 that they wanted. And the Department of Defense came in and took over the lead smelter. When they did that, there was so much SO2 that got into the air that it killed a lot of these trees. And in the area that we're sitting in right now, I had a good friend of mine that worked with me at Bunker Hill. He was an engineer, and he said where we are right now, all of those dead trees were burned in the mid-40s because it didn't take them long to die. And back in that era, we didn't have a tremendous amount of electricity and whatnot, and people had to burn wood in their stoves and whatnot. And something caused a fire here, a lightning strike or maybe sparks from a stove or whatever. In this area all burned all of the dead stuff, and you don't really see any dead material here. But it was the Department of Defense that really caused the biggest problem.
Did it seem insurmountable?
I thought we could do it right at the start. Everybody was worried about the soils like all the government people were and all of this. And I had another bad thing about Vietnam was that you had real deep soils on their hillsides. You had nothing but water paddies, rice paddies on the bottoms, or straight dense jungles that you couldn't hardly walk through. And I just watched them get destroyed and how fast they came back naturally. And there was one batch that was destroyed a couple years before I got there, and about the year I left, it was just about as green as that is out there. Not quite, but close to it. And I figured if there was that kind of bad stuff, this couldn't be much worse. It was to a point in the top 8 to 10 inches only because the soil became pretty severely acid. But we took soil samples from the surface and then down to 2 inches, down to 4 inches, down to 6, and by the time we got to 8 inches, the pH of the soil was just right at what the pH of all native conifer patches that there are as far as the forests go. And so then we figured that we could plant roots that started feeding themselves and picking up the nutrients and the water at about 10 to 12 inches. And so that's when we got into the container idea. And the containers were just coming out then. The Forest Service had put in a couple greenhouses in Coeur d'Alene, and there were, the University of Idaho had one small greenhouse down there. And so we learned quite a bit about that. And the first summer I was here, I had experimental plots. And we had one right around the corner of this hill, around this hill, and then we had them on side hills everywhere here that I planted along with a bunch of kids that the companies hired for me. And we planted all these experimental plots, and then we used containers, but then we used the bare root trees, which was the most common tree to plant. And the bare roots with their feeders from the surface on down, we didn't get probably 5% survival. But with the containers, we were getting excellent survival. We were in, at that time, we were in the 80% survival rate. We lost a lot of trees only because of erosion factors on the bare hillsides. But once we got going and knew you could grow containers, I shouldn't say this, but it became one of the easiest jobs I had. I used to have to figure out how to build 8-9 miles of logging road at one area to harvest the timber off of, and that was a lot harder than coming out here from the middle of April to the 1st of July and planting trees with 85 kids. I had a whole pile more high school kids doing a lot of that work. And essentially in the summertime, we were working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And a whole pile of the kids had tents up there, and they just stayed there. And it was quite a deal.
Had Ed not done the work along with the people that helped him to reforest the area, what do you think it would be today? Do you think anything would have happened?
Well, nothing would have happened certainly to this extent. The end result would have been a tremendous amount of erosion because it was not planted, and they basically sculptured that entire mountainous area in there prior to the plantings. And so it would have been a tremendous amount of erosion. It would have gone down into the Coeur d'Alene River and or ultimately then into Coeur d'Alene Lake.
But this is all of our tree planting that you see here that we're driving through now.
All this surrounding us, or just up on these hills?
No, everything. Everything you see.
White pine is sure growing good in here.
Yeah, the white pine is unbelievable. All these smaller ones we see along the road, they're all seedlings from this one here. This is the one we would have planted right there. You can see the diameter of it.
So how many acres did you replant?
Well, the area was, that would have been 3 miles, and then it was 6 miles long.
That's 18 square miles.
Yeah. We planted trees from 74 up through 82, and then EPA essentially shut us down. We couldn't grow any more trees in the mine because they said it was too dangerous to be down there. And they shut us down until about 89, and then we started planting again, and it took us another 89, 90, 91, 92, 93, 5 years, and we had it all done.
Who benefits from this?
Well, I think that everyone benefits from it. And now it's been approximately 40 years ago or longer since that process started, and now they're even harvesting some of the timber and the seedlings that were planted during that time frame. And Idaho white pine, which was the predominant species, also is a very valuable, marketable phase of that timber industry. So it's kind of coming around, but it's a natural resource that was planted that's now being harvested also.
When the mines were running, that was the economy, you know, but the hillsides were bare. I mean, they were ugly bare. And if that area was going to have a new economy when the mines left, you know, it had to be prettier than it was, that's for sure. And I mean, it was the right thing to do, you know, to help Mother Nature look good again. And now there's so much of that area relies on tourism, ski resort, and the Hiawatha, the Trail of the Hiawatha. I mean, most of my tourist people that would come here to ride with me, they would have two things at least that they would do. And if they were active at all, they would do the Trail of the Hiawatha, and they would do Silverwood. And then maybe a day that they would do here, a boat out on the lake, whatever. I mean, that's just kind of a given, you know, and that wouldn't happen if it was ugly up there, you know, but with all the trees, and then the Hiawatha with the trestles, and the Trail of the Coeur d'Alenes start up there and comes down. You know, that was another railroad grade that they've done. And so all of that just feeds into that area having the opportunity to have a different economy than what they had.
A lot of times, maybe even most of the time nowadays, we hear about big industry. It doesn't matter if it's mining or you know, steel manufacturing, whatever it may be. It gets this bad rap as if it's actually a plague to the local society. But here you have a corporation seeking for the better good for the society. What was behind that?
Well, a lot of it was the fact that we lived there. I mean, I would go to the grocery store. I would stop and pick up a hamburger, and you know, you'd run into these people, and it's a lot easier to be neighborly when you're treating somebody fairly. And I think it was just a sense of good corporate citizenship.
If you could have people know anything about the story of what happened here, what would you want them to know?
Oh, one of the biggest things is what most people really don't believe, but everything that was done here was all because the industry wanted it to be done. There was a tremendous amount of dollars spent on this project. Some of the terracing was probably way over 10 times the cost of planting the trees. And that was not cheap. It was right around $1,000 a day for one of those cats that did the terracing. The thing was, the companies paid for it. They gave me, like at the end of the year, they always knew that we were having this party for the kids, and they just called the Steins and the Pickwick people, and who were all local people that owned 2 big grocery stores here. Whatever he needs, put it on our account. And with what they did, and with the way the kids were talking, they were the ones, those were the 2 entities that did the most here. And they're the ones, the company and the kids are the ones I respect the most.